right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys today, Martin Fitzwater doing a guest posing at under 3 weeks out from the 2025 Pittsburgh Pro. And this was at the NPC/IFBB Midwest Championships. Now, this one is really interesting because, A, a lot of people sent me this. I think more people sent me this clip today than anything else going on in bodybuilding. And B, a lot of the comments, especially on Instagram, are overwhelmingly negative about how Martin looks here. And I was kind of surprised about that. And as I watched the video a couple times, I was kind of trying to cherry pick like what things people were talking about here. And, you know, the main thing that really jumps out to me as far as negatives, maybe his midsection and also his conditioning. I would say, like, when I was watching this, the first thing I thought was he looks bigger, which obviously is something he said he was doing. He was trying to put on as much tissue as possible between Prague and this show. So to me, he did look like he's definitely put on some muscle since the last time we saw him on stage. And I think more importantly, since the last time that we saw him go against Nick Walker, which was all the way back at last year's New York Pro. And I think that's important because at that show, that's where he pushed Nick. And he actually had, I think, one or two of the judges had him in first. So it wasn't like a unanimous decision of Nick winning. At least somebody on that judging panel felt that Martin had won that show. So between then and now, he's certainly put on a lot of size, or a substantial amount of size. But like, as far as people sending me this clip, almost every single person that sent me this clip was accompanied by a message like, you know, he doesn't look good here. He's off. He's going to miss the mark. And I would say, like, I would agree to an extent. Like, I can see what people are saying here. We're under 3 weeks out now. This is like crunch time. Guys are in really good shape. You know, some of the stuff that we've seen from Derek, some of the stuff that we've seen from Nick. So I would say to that extent, I agree about the midsection and I agree about the conditioning. And then, you know, some of the other people that were sending me this were saying things like he looks a little unhealthy here. His body looks tired. And I can kind of see what they mean. I was kind of noticing like his color as he was posing. And it could just be because the lights are so bright and he's a paler skinned guy. But seeing like the red and kind of the green when he's posing. And when I say the green, I saw some people commenting about his face. The coloring of his face and around his eyes was like a red or a green and gray. I can see what people are saying there for sure. But Martin is a guy that I don't want to be quick to count out somebody like Martin. Because you look back at the Olympia, because you look back at Prague, and these were recent shows. Top 4 at the Olympia. He's one of only, I believe, 4 guys to defeat Chris Bumstead. Beating Chris in Prague was a huge feather in his cap. And, you know, even going back to last year's Detroit, even going back to last year's New York Pro, you know, he beat good Vito. And I think obviously now I think some of the hype has died down a little bit about good Vito, but, you know, pushing Nick Walker in New York. And when you look at this lineup in Pittsburgh and you think about that top 3, I still think Martin is going to be in that top 3. I think that Derek, at this point, to me, Derek seems like a pretty clear favorite to win this. I think more of the question with Pittsburgh, I think it is going to be highly competitive, but I think more of the question is, who is that top 2 going to be? Is it going to be Nick and Derek? Is it going to be Martin and Derek? Or I guess potentially it could also be Martin and Nick. And I saw one of the people that sent this clip to me said something to the effect of, you know, it feels like looking at this that Martin could be like another Patrick Moore or another Justin Rodriguez, where they have 1 or 2 really good showings and then it kind of drops off from there. I would say I think that's a little bit of a stretch. You know, Martin was top 4 at the Olympia. Obviously, neither Patrick nor Justin ever placed nearly that high at the Olympia. And since, especially over the past year and a half, Martin has been pretty consistent as far as really good placings. It seems like he's improving between every show that he's done over the last, you know, like I said, year and a half-ish. I don't think I would agree that Martin is going to be, you know, a 1 or 2 hit wonder. He's very young. He's got a lot of potential. He's a very hard worker. I like him a lot. I like his physique a lot. He seems like a really nice guy. But I will say, like I said, I do agree with some of the comments that I saw, like, looking at this guest posing, we are 3 weeks out. We are very close to the show. I think that maybe, at most, if people had him in their predictions winning the show, I could understand people changing that prediction. I think this does, looking at this, I think tilts it more in favor to Derek and less in favor to Martin, even though they were only separated. They were right next to each other in placings at the Olympia. Derek was third and Martin was fourth, but obviously the Olympia isn't a great indicator of the future because then Derek turned around and beat Sampson a couple months later at the Arnold. But that's pretty much what I would say. I would say, I agree to an extent. I do think he looks a little bit off in this guest posing. We do still have 3 weeks to go. I mean, we're not a week out. There is still a good amount of time. I mean, a lot can change with a bodybuilder's physique in 3 weeks. I mean, let's not pretend that that's not a good chunk of time. But I think that I would say at this point, for me, Derek is the favorite here. And I think, also to the point of people saying his physique looks tired, burnout in bodybuilding is a real thing. But Martin hasn't been competing like that frequently. Like when you talk about, someone gave the example of Justin Rodriguez, like I said earlier. Justin was competing in like, half a dozen shows back to back to back to back. Martin's last show was Prague, and that was in 2024. I mean, Prague and the Olympia were pretty close, but there was a good amount of space between that New York Pro in Prague. And there's a pretty good amount of space between Prague and Pittsburgh. So I don't know. I don't think his body would be worn out, tired looking from that, because it's not like he's done half a dozen preps in the last 6 months. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. How do you think Martin looks at this guest posing? And give me your predictions for the Pittsburgh Pro. Have they changed, like your top 3 in order? Did they change because of this guest posing? And the reason I spent so much time on this guest posing is, like I said, there was a pretty overwhelming amount of negative comments on this video and of people sending me this clip. I think the overwhelming impression seemed to be people were underwhelmed by this. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Now, next up in the news, on the topic of Nick Walker, this is just kind of a fun story because I saw this on my feed today, and I saw a lot of people talking about this as well. This was interesting because what they did here, obviously, this is not Nick's actual physique. They took Nick's upper body and added Good Vito's lower body to it. And obviously, this fantasy physique looks insane. Well, that's because it's not real. But that kind of speaks to the point that I made, I think, in the last video that I did. With Nick's quads being something that people have pointed out as one of his weak points, that he seems a little top-heavy. He doesn't seem to have as much, size for one, but like detail and separation for another in the quads. And with a lot of people pointing that out at his past few showings, and then seeing this comparison, like where you put Good Vito's legs onto his physique, you can really see that difference. That kind of speaks to the point that I was making in that last video, is like when you see Nick next to a guy like Good Vito, I don't necessarily think Good Vito would beat Nick head to head. But when you're standing next to somebody with a lower body that crazy, particularly his quads, which is something that people constantly point out about Nick as being a weakness, it'll further expose that weakness in Nick's physique, and that could hurt him, even if he still beats Good Vito. Just seeing him next to him could make him look worse by comparison. And I think this kind of fantasy physique post reiterates that, because when you look at this image of Nick with Good Vito's lower body, it looks like a completely different physique, completely different bodybuilder. And I mean, that's because it is, but you can see a massive difference in how Nick looks here. And I think right now, if I had to give like a rudimentary prediction for Pittsburgh, and obviously anything can happen because we still got 3 weeks, but if I had to go just off the physique updates that I've seen from all these guys so far, right now, based on physique updates alone, not how they look on stage, because we don't know how they're going to look on stage, but based on physique updates alone and just, on paper, I would go Derek in first. I think I would go, at this point, I think I'd go Nick in second. And I think I'd go Martin in third. And either Krizo or Bonac in fourth. Probably Bonac. I think Bonac has a little bit more of a consistent track record than Krizo, even though in Krizo's updates, he's like the biggest freak at all these guys when it comes to Instagram. But I think I would go Derek first, Nick second, Martin third. I'm going to say Bonac fourth, Krizo fifth. And I guess that would put Good Vito sixth. I just, like I said in earlier videos, I don't see Good Vito beating even someone like Bonac from the sides and from the back. So yeah, I guess that would put him in sixth. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Now, next up in the news. So this past weekend, there was a competition called the Siberian Pro, which is part of the other IFBB, the IFBB Elite Pro. And the guy that won that show was a guy named Bodebi Nadukuru, a.k.a. Destiny5. That's his Instagram handle. We've talked about him a handful of times before. And I would say that right now, he is considered probably the best bodybuilder in the other IFBB. Like, genetically gifted. He's winning a lot of shows. He won their biggest title, which I believe was the IFBB Mr. World this past year. And I was watching this video from this past weekend's Siberian Pro, and I still see these parallels between his physique and Andrew Jack's from like a muscle belly, muscle insertion point of view. That like 3D, almost superhero-like type of physique, like these crazy round full muscles. Obviously, not to the same extent as Andrew Jack in terms of size and in terms of, you know, the craziness of Andrew's physique. But I was looking at this and I was thinking, you know, how long is it going to take for this guy to eventually switch over to this IFBB? Because, for example, you know, Michael Krizo obviously came over from the other IFBB when he was their top star and had basically won every show they had multiple times. Good Vito, I believe, was only an amateur, like in the amateur portion of the other IFBB before he switched over. And, you know, eventually these guys that actually are really genetically gifted, really good bodybuilders, eventually once they've won everything over there, they come to this IFBB to test themselves against the best in the world and try to get to the Olympia, because the Olympia really is the... I don't think there's really any dispute about this across the world, any bodybuilding federation. The Olympia really is the gold standard. If you're going to call yourself the best bodybuilder in the world, or even one of the best, it has to be based on how you did at the Olympia, because that's where the best bodybuilders in the world are competing. And so every time I see a video of Destiny5 competing and seeing him, you know, just continue to win everything that they've got in that other IFBB, I wonder how long it's going to be before he makes the switch and comes over here like Krizo did and gets his pro card, does an amateur show, gets his pro card, and tries to get to the Olympia. I think he would have to put on some size to be more competitive with this IFBB, and I think he'd have to come in certainly tighter than he came in over there. And again, I think that's kind of reinforcing the point that that's how good he is in that other organization, which kind of lacks elite-level competition. Like, he's not going up against guys like we have here, and I feel like that's why he's winning with maybe not as conditioned as a conditioned of a package, not as big of a bodybuilder. I mean, he's big, but I feel like he would have to put on some size to be competitive here. And I was kind of wondering, like, when is he going to make that switch, and if he's going to make that switch. So that's the first question that I have for you guys, is do you think he will? And the second question that I have for you guys is, how do you think he'll do if he does make that switch and somehow makes it to the Olympia? Do you see him being a top 10 guy? Let me know in the comments below. Now, the final story that I've got for you guys today, the latest physique update from Terrence Ruffin, posing for Hany Rambod at under 3 weeks out from the 2025 Pittsburgh Pro. Now, I've said this before, but I think that Terrence will be like the talk of the year. He's going to be the surprise of the year when it comes to classic physique. I believe he said he's going to do 4 classic physique shows total in 2025, and I believe that's including the Olympia. and Pittsburgh as well. I think he's going to win Pittsburgh. I think he's going to look maybe the best he's ever looked at the Pittsburgh show. And I think he's going to win whatever other shows he does for the rest of the year between now and the Olympia. I think he's going to win everything. And I think he will be top 3 at the Olympia this year. Very early prediction. I think Terrence is going to be the talk of the classic physique division for most of the near future. I think, you watch this posing video. How can you not be impressed with how Terrence is looking? I think the time that he took off was really well served for him. I think it really did his physique good to take that time off. And I think we're going to see the fruits of that on stage. And I don't know, to what extent he's working with Hany Rambod. I know that Hany is not his coach, but he's done several collab videos with Hany. So I think Hany is helping him to some extent. I mean, at least what we can see in the video, he's obviously helping him with his posing. Not that Terrence necessarily even needs any help with his posing, but I'm sure Hany is giving him some advice or some tips or some pointers here and there. And obviously that's the guy that you want tips and pointers from because, obviously Chris Bumstead, Hany coached, and so many other Olympia titles fall under the Hany Rambod legacy, the Hany Rambod dynasty. I think that Terrence is going to shock a lot of people. There's so much talk about Mike Sommerfeld. There's still a lot of talk about Ramon Dino. Who's going to be the guy that comes in and is going to be able to fill the shoes of Chris Bumstead? Not as much talk about Ruff Diesel being that guy, but I feel like he's got a really good chance at being that guy. I think this is the best I've seen him look at 3 weeks out from any show. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification icon if you have not already. And as always, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at Nick Strength Power. My Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power. My secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.